Hey everybody, Quantum back here again, and I wanted to go ahead and revisit my Emerald Steel deck from Ursula's Return because I did say that I thought this would be one of the strongest decks for this format moving forward. And again, that might change over time, but right now it does seem to be very, very strong. And in this particular video, we're going to take a look at three matchups. The first one here is against Ruby Amethyst, and we already know, or you should know, that Emerald Steel already had a decent matchup into Ruby Amethyst. But I think with the new powerful Emerald cards, and I guess Steel cards too to a certain degree, that we got in Ursula's Return, this deck has just become even better, whereas Ruby Amethyst kind of has stalled out. It didn't really get too many good cards, especially on the Amethyst side. We got almost no good Amethyst cards in Ursula's Return, which is kind of crazy to say. But I think Emerald definitely has overtaken Amethyst as the best color in the game now. Anyways, we curve out quite nicely with the Robin Hood on 1 with a shift target in hand and the Bucky on turn 2. The opponent on turn 2, likely knowing that the shift is coming, makes an interesting play here, but I will take this all day. They're going to establish double Rafiki on turn 2 and then quest with their Minnie Mouse, most likely to try to say, okay, I know the Robin Hood shift is coming, I want you to challenge my Minnie Mouse, and then I'll take out your Robin Hood with my double Rafikis. And I will take that trade all day because, first of all, the Bucky will discard, which puts you down to 3 cards. I'll get the 2 lore off of the Robin Hood challenging the Minnie Mouse, which in this particular instance, the 2 lore doesn't really represent all that much because we're not in a race in this particular matchup. But you using both of your Rafikis to challenge my Robin Hood eliminates your board presence, and then it gives me a draw off of the Robin Hood as well. So you can see here, this is a very favorable trade for me. For the opponent who was on the draw and had the extra card, they are now very much so behind the 8 ball because not only have we made them discard with the Bucky, but we just traded out their whole board. But I guess, given what their hand was, there wasn't much they could do, really. So now with this Bucky on board, we're now going to be able to drop this Diablo, force the discard of one of their final 2 cards here, and then the Sun Chill will force them to discard their final card. And you can kind of see the situation they were in. Queen's Castle and Snake, not too much to play out there. Their hand was very low to the ground, which is what you want when you start off in a match, but it just wasn't enough to do anything against the engine that is Emerald Steel. And here now we have Diablo draw engine, draw during the opponent's turn whenever they draw, and Beast Tragic Hero draw during our turn. You know, they're only on 3 ink, they can't ink further. This match was over by turn 4. Unfortunately for the opponent, there was almost nothing, in my opinion, that they could do, and that's just how dominant this deck could be. Next up, we're going up against a Ruby Steel deck, and this is one of the rogue decks that I think is now somewhat playable, if not very playable, after Ursula's Return, because while in the first 3 sets of Lorcana, this ink pairing just couldn't really work all that well, I do think that Ruby and Steel got some nice new additions in Ursula's Return that make this ink pairing potentially playable now. And again, if Atlanta's taught us anything, don't write off rogue decks because look what happened in Atlanta. Anyways, the opponent starts off by inking a Felicia and passing turn. We're going to start with a Diablo 1-drop since that's our only 1-drop, but the reveal of the hand there does kind of guide our lines of play a little bit because now we know we have to rip that Grab Your Swords out of the opponent's hand with that Ursula Deceiver closer to when they're able to play it, either on a shift target or coming up to turn 5. But in the meantime, I can opt to develop my board a little bit more, so you're going to see me set up the Bucky quest with the Diablo and pass turn. The opponent didn't do anything for the first 2 turns, but now they're going to finally drop that Minnie Mouse, of which we know they had at least 2. They might have drawn into more, but that is not going to be threatening us at all because we know we can curve out into this Ursula Deceiver. And unless the opponent drew like a Brawl or something like that, this Ursula Deceiver of all is going to be able to double sing that Let the Storm Rage On, give us a draw 2, and out this Minnie Mouse. They're going to opt to sing Storm of their own to take out my Diablo, likely just fishing for cards at this point. They're going to ink a Sisu and drop another Minnie Mouse, valuing an aggro approach in this matchup at the moment. Now, they are lower on cards, but they were on the play. But we're going to really start to pull away in this game now with the Ursula Deceiver of all singing the Let the Storm Rage On to out one of their Minnie Mouses, getting a draw 2 and outing a card on the opponent's board. It's insanely strong, and because they're coming up on turn 5, I'm going to rip that Grab Your Swords out of their hand. We see that they have no way to immediately deal with our Ursula Deceiver of all, which means that we can potentially sing another song next turn if we want, but instead I'm going to opt to hard cast this Sudden Chill. Probably shouldn't have done that and saved it for the Ursula Deceiver of All to double discard, but it's fine because next turn we're going to force a discard anyways with Beast Tragic Hero. And yeah, the opponent ends up with one card in hand anyways, inking what they top deck in the Hercules Bodyguard to play that Minnie Mouse, the third one that's in their hand there. And then the Beast Tragic Hero drops and forces them to discard their final card in the fill. And at this point, the opponent is going to attempt to race me because that's all they can really do. They are on 5 ink though, and they top deck something very interesting in the Queen of Hearts Sensing Weakness. And this card can draw them cards, but there's no point in them throwing their Minnie Mouses into my Ursula Deceiver, taking 1 damage each to draw 2 cards because they've already used up basically their ink for the turn, right? They've used up 5 ink to play the Queen of Hearts. Therefore, whatever they draw, they might be able to ink something, but then they're stuck with a card in hand that gets discarded off the Bucky anyways, which as you can see here, we did have the Floodborn in the Diablo to drop. Now we have 2 draw engines online, Beast Tragic Hero and Diablo. The opponent is in a really rough spot. We Zeus away one of the Minnie Mouses and say, that's fine if you want to challenge the Beast because you'll lose whatever you challenge into it with, whether it be the Queen or the Minnie Mouse there. And we still have another draw engine in the Diablo. We go, oh man, we get 2 storms off of that draw 2 with the Beast. And then we're going to go ahead and use Bruno by singing it with the Beast to force the out of the Queen Sensing Weakness, meaning it goes back to their hand and they're forced to discard it since we forced the discard of their entire hand already, making that Bruno action or song basically an emerald removal spell. The opponent top decks, realizes there's nothing they can do, and I think they just end up scooping it up. In this final matchup, we're going into what many people probably think is the meta-defining match of the format, at least at the start, in Ruby Sapphire versus Emerald Steel. What many people, like I said, are thinking are the 2 best decks of the format right now. Being on the play, though, represents a tremendous advantage, and we do have to aggressively mulligan for a 1-drop, and thankfully we do find it. What I will say about this match is I think that Emerald Steel potentially has the advantage if you are able to slow them down before they're able to get a solid Hiram draw engine online. And what you're going to see me do here is potentially try to rip the 1-drop ahead out of the opponent's hand. And their hand is really good. They have Inkables, they have Brawl for my Diablo and or Ursula Deceiver of All if I have it. They have a Hiram in hand already. They have a Fishbone Quill. They have a Sisu, which can answer this Pegasus. And they have a Maui, which again is probably just ink. So they're looking pretty good. They dropped the Scuttle, hoping to get into some more card advantage, and thankfully they missed there. We draw an Ursula Deceiver of All, and now I have to think, what is the best line of play here? I am susceptible to a Brawl, but it does take 3 ink, so it'll take their turn. But it's too risky, because if I drop the Ursula Deceiver or the Diablo to try to bait out the Brawl, and the opponent just says, that's fine, I'm still going to go ahead and ramp with Fishbone Quill, that means my Aladdin is 2 turns away from potentially outing that Fishbone Quill, which gives the opponent enough ramp to probably get their top end online, and then I just lose the game. So I opted to play the Aladdin here instead of trying to bait out the Brawl with the Diablo or the Ursula Deceiver of All. The opponent plays a slower line of play here, opting not to play the Fishbone Quill until they have an answer to this Aladdin, and playing the Sisu to out the Pegasus. So we're playing a little bit of a slower game here. The opponent slows down my aggro questing power with that Sisu, and we still threaten this Aladdin taking out the items. So again, valuing some board control here and using the Let the Storm Rage on as a hard cast instead of trying to sing it with Ursula Deceiver of All, which as you can see there now becomes ink since we've foregone that line in order to take out the Scuttle with the Aladdin and just quest with the Ursula Deceiver of All. The opponent eventually does play the Fishbone Quill, and then they say whoops, I think indicating that they didn't want to do that. They do have another Fishbone Quill though, and they ink that one. If they ink with this Fishbone Quill, I mean, they would be down to 3 cards. We out the Fishbone Quill anyways. The extra ink may not represent all that much since the opponent is still coming up on 5 ink, which is the magical number that they need anyways to be able to play 2 interactions in a turn, a Popsicle or a Shield of Virtue or an Ice Block, and a Hero. Instead, they're going to Ice Block and then use Brawl to out the Aladdin because they need an answer to the Aladdin eventually. They ink yet another Fishbone Quill, so not valuing the ramp on the Fishbone here, likely knowing that if they dump their whole hand, being on Emerald Steel discard, will eventually discard their hand, and so they need to get their Hiram draw engine online. So they end up discarding the Hiram off of my Diablo, triggering with the Bucky that I'm able to play both in 1 turn on 5 ink. but I don't know if they top decked that Hiram. It looked like they did, or if they had just two Hirams in hand and they discarded one, because obviously, you know, if you have two, you discard one. But they pass, and they did get a draw too. However, the double draw off of the Beast Tragic Hero and the double draw we're going to get off of this Diablo is going to put me way too far ahead. Once I drop this Aladdin to trigger a discard and then potentially out the opponent's items again and out their Hiram here, they're going to have a hard time trying to come back, and so they just end up scooping it up. So just like that, Emerald Steel is able to take that, but it could have gone either way if the opponent was able to develop their Hiram engine with low cost items within the same turn to prevent me from being able to pop them with the Aladdin. So again, on screen here is the deck list, and if you enjoyed this video, a like would be appreciated. The deck list is linked in the description and or pinned in the comments. But also, if you are still here, leave a comment. Let me know what you think of this video, of what you think of this deck. If you want to see me play anything in the future, I'd be happy to take a look. Thank you again for watching though. Quantum is out.